The Albanese Government is pressing on with proposed changes to the Freedom of Information Act. They're taking away the free part of freedom of information. In fact, they're even restricting the information. So it's really as one correspondent said yesterday, the FO Act. That's the trouble. This Freedom of Information Amendment Bill 2025 is going through its second reading. In other words, the proper formal debate in the House of Representatives. It's referred to the Federation Chamber, which is a chamber which is normally reserved for uncontroversial legislation where everyone's in furious agreement. It doesn't seem like that's the case, and understandably so, because governments need to be able to produce information reasonably, fairly, quickly, asked by reasonable people. It really is important we know how decisions are made. The amendments claim to be modernising the system, reducing inefficiencies and address an abusive process which has consumed a disproportionate amount of resources. In other words, the FOI office is a terrific place to work until people actually ask questions. It's nonsense. And it means that if you're going to make an FOI request, you're going to be charged a fee. So only the people with the funds really committed to a cause are going to be able to play. I just think it sounds like a new tax. The Shadow Attorney General is the member for Fisher, Andrew Wallace, and he joins me now. Andrew, good to talk to you. I mean, this is very concerning, this sort of stuff. Tinkering with FOI is bad news.
It is, Gary, and can I say it's great to talk to a Queenslander from down here in Canberra.
Yeah, well, you feel like it's a lifeline between you and me.
Look, Gary, this is a bill that the Coalition has been fighting for from the get-go, fighting against from the get-go, I should say. We are utterly opposed to this bill. This is an attempt by the government to effectively shut down democracy. The citizens of any country, but the citizens in Australia have a right to know the decisions that their government makes on their behalf. They have a right to know what their departments are doing. They have a right to know how much money is being spent. This is really basic stuff. And what the government is doing is it's going to make it even harder for people like yourselves, journalists, and citizens, everyday citizens, to be able to ask questions of their government. This is not a matter of modernisation. This is shutting down democracy, and the Coalition is going to fight it every single step of the way.
Well, in some jurisdictions, Andrew Wallace, they call it right to information, the right to know. It's reasonable that citizens ask questions, and they don't have to be, and I understand you would call me a journalist. I've never pretended to be one. I'm a commentator, and I call it as I see it. This is simply wrong. Restricting access to information means government has something to hide, or they can't be bothered disclosing what they think you want to know.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, under these changes, there's going to be, one of the many things that we have a problem with in this bill is that there's going to be this arbitrary cap. If it's going to take more than what they think will be 40 hours in research to be able to provide that information to you, the government can just say, no, we're not going to provide that information to you. It's too hard. Well, democracy, it drowns in the shadows, and the citizenry, the everyday mum and dads, the general public have a right to know the decisions that are being made on their behalf. That is one of the bulwarks of our democracy. And this government, they came to power in 2022 espousing all of these great virtues of, vote for us and there'll be restored democracy and restored integrity and accountability. Well, what a crock. Because ever since they won power in 2022, they have been trying to shut things down. And this bill is a very, very good example of that.
I find the whole thing very sad, just reflecting on it, because I know in my time, five and a bit years as a minister, we were conscious that anything we wrote in correspondence between ministers' offices and departments and so forth always had to be basically capable of being on the front page, as we used to say, of the Daily Telegraph or the Courier Mail, to use the Queensland example. I mean, we knew that people rightly would want to know what we had been negotiating, how we'd been formulating policy. And so we were always conscious of even writing on the margins, knowing that it was always possible somebody could ask for it. So when you're on the decision-making trail, you've got to have your wits about you. You've got to understand that it's up for accountability. Now they want to take that away. That's what worries me.
Yep. This is a very slippery slope in my view. One of the other things, and this is the really egregious things about this bill, they want to introduce what we call a truth tax. People will be having to pay through the nose for the information that should be able to be, received by them for nothing. This concept, most Australians would understand the concept of cabinet confidentiality. If cabinet is just making a decision about something, the deliberations that cabinet make, then that's confidential. But what governments have done over the years is that they've wheeled trolleys of folders and books into cabinet. These books have been sitting there, notes, diary entries. They never get talked about in cabinet, but they are somehow exempt. But now this government is going even further. And if there is a document that just simply refers, it might say cabinet in confidence. It could say this document is to be discussed by cabinet. It's exempt. That they are absolutely pushing the envelope, this government, because they are allergic to transparency.
Well, that's something Kevin Rudd perfected when he was advising the late Wayne Goss as Premier of Queensland in the early 90s. I mean, they wheeled a whole pile of stuff, I think, to a Queensland government cabinet meeting in Mount Isa, made it all cabinet in confidence, and then it eventually ended up being shredded, destroyed, and that was leading to the Heiner stuff. There's a whole lot of these sorts of bad things that have happened from time to time, but never in the federal parliament, Andrew Wallace. I mean, you're a former speaker. You understand what I mean. The Australian parliament normally sets a higher standard than this. This is lowering it down to, say, a provincial parliament like the one in Queensland. That's what really also upsets me.
Yeah, and you're a former MP yourself, Gary. You know how the place operates. And it really concerns me greatly when a government such as this one, led by Anthony Albanese, is cracking down on accountability. We have had division after division after division today because the government is ramming legislation through in relation to the environmental laws, these new environmental laws. 1,500 pages worth of bills and explanatory memoranda that were provided to us just last Thursday night. And the government has just gagged debate, as they did on the FOI bill, continually gag debate, push it through Parliament, get it in, get it out as quickly as you possibly can, and hope that the media don't wake up to it. I can tell you one thing, the media is very, very seized of this Freedom of Information bill because they know that their ability to be able to access government information, their ability to be able to hold the government to account is going to be significantly altered by this, and that is exactly what this government wants to do.
Well, for heaven's sakes, keep having those divisions, the formal votes, because on principle you should be recorded against these sorts of things, not just let it go through on the voices.
We are fighting these things every step of the way.
Even though you're going to lose every vote, I get it,
What did John Howard say about the ironclad laws of arithmetic?
Yeah.
We've just got to get our numbers back up there at the next election, and we are working hard to try and do just that.
Well, I mean, the key point is that on principle you've got to stand on these sorts of issues. Can I ask about Mike Burgess's comments? So you're the Shadow Attorney-General, so you should be across this, I'm sure. This major address about foreign interference, 3 nations, he wouldn't name them, with a potential lethal assassination, on Australian soil being part of their mix. Why is it that it's been left to, albeit a senior bureaucrat, to name this? Why haven't prime ministers and, say, the Attorney General actually given Australians the kind of warning that Mike Burgess could only hint at? We need to know a bit more about this, don't we?
We do, and my answer to you is that this government is weak on national security. And I'm not saying that from a position of ignorance. I was the Deputy Chair of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security for 3.5 years before I was just appointed the Shadow Attorney-General just 3 weeks ago. I know this government has had to be dragged kicking and screaming to implement laws like our state sponsors of terrorism bill. We were arguing that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps should be listed as a terrorist organisation for more than 2.5 years. This government kept on saying, no, the criminal code doesn't enable us to do that because it's a state entity. We said, well, okay, if that's the case, we'll do whatever we can to amend the criminal code. And they just kept on blocking us, kept on pushing back. And then on the 26th of August this year, Mike Burgess stood up and made the announcement that the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, was instrumentally involved and in fact directed to terrorist attacks on Australian soil. Everybody would remember that.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, this government went into a flap. And all of a sudden, it had to push legislation through the parliament very, very quickly to enable an amendment to the criminal code, which would ultimately see the IRGC listed. But this is my point. This is my very point. I think it was Winston Churchill once said about one of our own allies that you can always count on them to do the right thing after they've exhausted all other avenues. And that's exactly what this government is doing here. You can always count on the Labor Party to ultimately do the right thing once they've sat on their hands for 2.5 years and they've exhausted all avenues. We were talking about the listing of the IRGC 2.5 years ago. They refused, and then Mike Burgess makes his comments. All of a sudden, it's breakneck speed about getting this bill through the Parliament.
Well, the problem is, though, Andrew Wallace, that we've got this social cohesion issue. You've got misinformation, crisinformation, lack of information, all of these things, foreign manipulation, all of these things all happening at once. We need to have Australia strengthened, not allowed to fray. The social fabric should not be fraying. And I don't know what we're going to do to help social cohesion. We've got to give people a project to galvanise everybody onto something, I would have thought.
Well, the comments that Mike Burgess made on Tuesday night, I think it was. Mike, I've known Mike for 3.5 years. I worked very closely with him. He is an excellent Director-General of Security. Australians should be very proud of our intelligence agencies and the work that they and their staff and their teams do that keep Australians safe, not just in Australia but across the world.
Okay.
Mike Burgess is brilliant at what he does, and he's very careful in his language. And I listened to his speech very carefully when he talked about when he likened Hizb ut-Tahrir to neo-Nazi groups. Now, I think what Mike Burgess was saying to the government, in my view, is that it's time that Hizb ut-Tahrir is listed as a terrorist organisation. Now, I know Mike talked about that this organisation walks a very, very fine line in not breaking the law on Australian soil, but we know that Hizb ut-Tahrir has been listed in the United Kingdom, it's been listed in Germany, it's been listed in a number of allied countries, and they've listed this organisation as a terrorist organisation because they are involved in terrorist acts around the world. The terrorism doesn't have to happen in Australia for them to be listed as a terrorist.
I would have thought not. We're quick on following international conventions and everything. I got about 20 seconds, but where are you at with net zero? What's your position on this, Andrew Wallace?
Well, Gary, we're working through a deliberative process.
Oh, come on. You've got to tell me that you're against it. Come on, hurry up.
I'm a member of the executive, Gary. You would understand that.
But one of your colleagues said that she's dead set against it. She's polled her electorate, and they said, no, it's out as far as I'm concerned. So, I just thought maybe you might have joined in on her. That was all.
We will go through our process led by Dan Tehan, and we'll come out with our results.
All right. I've got to ask, and listen, have you been practising your pose for your portrait? Bob Catter's got one today. How's your portrait going?
Well, I tell you what, Gary, that is the absolute last thing on my mind. It gets me out of bed in the mornings is keeping Australia. You're
going to have a surfboard in the picture, aren't you, when you pose?
No.
You're from the sunny coast, Andrew.
Yeah,
Wallace.
look, I'm a lifesaver as well, but I don't know how we'll quite manage that one. But that is for when I leave this place. I'm certainly not interested in doing anything like that.
All right. Well, keep going. Come back to me as soon as you've got an answer on net zero. We'll publish it here at 4BC. Good to talk to you, sir. Thanks for your time. Andrew Wallace, member for Fisher, a Shadow Attorney General.
Authorised by Andrew Wallace, LNP, Boccarina, Queensland.